Next up are exposures, and these are ways to define downstream use of your DBT project. So, for example, maybe you're using your models for an external dashboard, or you're connecting it to an application, you're running some machine learning, maybe you're running some just general analysis, whatever it is. There are often ways to use DBT outside of just the database. So, in this, we're going to look at how to use it. We're going to understand the goal of exposures, how to add exposures to our own project, and then we'll just take a look at what it looks like in the documentation. So speaking of docs, let's take a look first at DBT's documentation. And again, here is what I kind of just mentioned in terms of the use of it. We're using it to define and describe downstream uses of your project. And ultimately, it's a YAML file. It's not another model. It's just a YAML file with configuration where you can indicate what it's based on, so what it depends on, the type of exposure that it is. And again, when we say exposure, we're saying these different external uses of the project, along with some other information like the owner, some description, maybe a URL to find it. And this is mainly for two things. You're going to see it in the documentation, and you can run commands with a selector based on this exposure. If we look at the properties, the three that are required are the name, it must be unique amongst exposures, and you must use snake case. And then the type. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 types at the time of this recording, and you must select one of these. And the reason you have to pick one of these and not just create your own is because it's used to be organized in the docs site that we'll see shortly. And then the owner, and then expected here is depends on, and this is refable, as they're saying, nodes, and that would be a ref or a source, kind of like the Jinja we see in our models. This allows you to select everything that it depends on. It kind of connects everything together. And with that said, it also makes the lineage clear in terms of what's used before it. And then everything else is optional, but if you can add it, I think it's helpful to do it. And now, because we'll need to take a look at the documentation, I am going to do this part in DBT Cloud just to be safe, because I know there are sometimes some issues on the hosted machine, but if you're working locally, you should be able to do this on your own. First, we'll go over to develop and create a new branch. I'll call this add exposures. And like I said before, these are YAML files, and we can put them within our models directory here, and you can put them within Marts. Maybe you make your own separate directory called exposures. This part is really up to you and kind of how it works with the rest of your design. For this scenario, I'm going to say, let's create a new folder called exposures just to keep it separate. And within here, I'm going to create a new exposure. And this is going to be, again, a YAML file. So let's say in this scenario, we have a dashboard that we use. Maybe it's in Tableau, Power BI, Looker, it doesn't matter, but it's a customer performance dashboard and one that's widely used in the company. So I'm going to create an exposure called customer performance dashboard.yaml. And let's go ahead and open this up. And within here is where we will create this exposure right here. And we can see this is similar to a lot of other YAML files here, where the main key determines what we're looking at. And in this case, it's exposure. So I'm going to copy this part right here, version 2, exposures. And I'm going to do side by side, actually, just to keep this together. All right. So now we'll go in 2 spaces, and we need to give it a name. And I'm going to keep the name the same as the file name. So customer performance dashboard, that's the name of the exposure. We need to indicate type, in this case, dashboard. Remember, it could be analysis, notebook, ML, application, whatever it is. Let's put a description. I'm not going to put maturity or URL because I don't have any of that, but we'll put a description. And I'm just going to copy and paste some notes that I have for sake of time. This is the primary dashboard used by all sales rep to monitor customer performance. All right, fantastic. Next, we want to add some more information. And in this case, we'll say depends on, so that we can connect it with the rest of our DAG, and it will work similar to a lot of other functions in DBT. Depends on, and this will be a list of refable nodes. Again, remember that's models or sources. So in this case, we'll say ref top customers. Remember, we have our Marts top customers. So we'll say it depends on that. And then just to show an example, we'll say source. This is going to end up being redundant, but just for the sake of example, we'll say tech store and then customers. And this is, again, just like we would do it in a query. Lastly, we'll put an owner. And in this case, name, I will say Michael K, email, student at Khan Data Solutions. All right, so now we have this here. What do we do with this? Well, like I mentioned, most of this is for documentation purposes. So if we go dbt docs, generate, and generate our new documentation, depends on a score name, text store customers, which was not found. I think that is because it is singular. Let me double check. The source is customer, singular. So that is why that failed. So I'll do customer, save. And I also want to just be safe, do a dbt deps to make sure that we have our packages installed, because sometimes that'll cause an error if you haven't added that. Okay, succeeded. All right, now we will do dbt docs generate. And because we're on dbt cloud, we'll be able to just take a look at that preview with this guy right here. So it's compiling everything and should be done shortly. Okay, done. And now we can view docs right here. Now, if you look to the left over here, we have this section called exposures. And here's why it's important to indicate the type, because under dashboard, this is now grouped. Whereas if we had analysis or application, the other ones would be grouped. And this is where we can see it has a description, the things it's dependent on, and everything else that goes along with it. And now it works just like anything else. And if we look at our lineage graph, we can see everything that factors into this exposure. And you can see that this is doing a selection based on the plus sign. And you could do a dbt build or a dbt run using this same command. And these are all of the items that would run before it. So that's another use case of the exposure. Now let's create one more just to show kind of the different buckets here. I'm going to create one more, and I'm going to call this one order analysis.yaml. And we'll just go through the same process, but this time it's going to be an analysis just to show you. And for sake of time, I'm going to copy and paste. I'll have this in the notes of the course, but we have exposures. We have the name. This time the type is analysis instead of dashboard. And we have some refs and myself as the owner. Otherwise, it's all the same. So let's now do another dbt docs generate to see this in action. Okay, docs succeeded. I'm going to close this one and open up a new version. And now again, over here, we can see there's two sections now. So we have analysis and we have dashboard, and all of this now is working together again through this one project. And it's just another great feature of dbt to keep things together, to keep yourself organized and kind of act as a hub for your entire data platform. So hopefully now you have a better understanding of how exposures work, and you can think about different ways to use this on your project.